the basic outline for today, what we're going to have a look at is Power BI, which is Microsoft's new business intelligence offering. We're going to look at it in general as a business intelligence offering, and we're going to look at it in direct relation to Dynamics NAV. In a nutshell, the function of Power BI is to allow you to be able to create reports and dashboards that are very visual and very accurate based on information that is fed into it. It's important to note that Power BI does require data cubes or data to be provided. Those of you who have come across or used Jet will know that Jet comes with predefined data cubes that you can use and predefined reports that you basically just have to, once it's in your Excel, as you can see here on my Jet tab, you just literally have to set up your data source and it's connected to NAV directly, and you can then use it to talk directly to your NAV database, and it comes with predefined reports and pre-created reports, as well as reports that you can create yourself. Power BI does not come with predefined data cubes. It is a tool that you are able to use to query data that you export from your database yourself, either via Excel or connecting it directly to the SQL Server database or tables. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a very brief look at creating a dashboard from an Excel file. So that's the Excel file you're looking at in front of you. Now we're going to keep this quite simple today, but towards the end of the webinar I will show you some of the more complex dashboards that have been created using information from Dynamics NAV and uploaded to Office 365. So we'll be creating our dashboard using this file on Power BI desktop, which you can download, which I have here, and the file that we'll be using is this file here, which effectively just has 5 columns on it. We have a location, a date, a type of card, a type of expense, a gender, and an amount. So this file is basically just several thousand lines of expense payments or expenditure for a business, and we're going to dissect that a little bit. So I'm just going to close this so that I can upload it. So the first thing that we need to do is open Power BI and say get data. Now when I say get data, we're obviously going to import a file directly from Excel, but you will be able to see when I come in here that Power BI supports a great deal of data models. This is not something that is unique just to Microsoft. It's something that will allow you to query data in any kind of database-based solution, really. So if we go into more here, you can see that if I drill down to the databases, it's not only SQL that's available and Access, which are Microsoft products. I can also query Oracle databases, IBM databases, SAP database, and so on. So this is not linked just to Microsoft products. You can use Power BI to query anything in any database or file type that is a data file. It supports all of those. So what we're going to do is we're going to simply upload my credit card transactions file. So I just say get data and I select my file and tell it to load the data. You can see it's now come and shown me the file that it has found. I select that file and it'll give me a preview. Now at this point I can check the file, make sure it's in the format that I want it to be in, make sure I'm happy with it. If I am not happy with anything, I can edit it. So I can come in here, select edit, it'll open it in an edit amount, and I can come in and change this to a decimal number because I don't just want long numbers, I want there to be actual decimal places and spaces in there. And then I can make any other changes that I want. You can see I've got the usual filter options here. I can type directly into the fields. Once I'm happy with the changes I've made, I can close and apply. It will then make the changes to the file and upload it again into my Power BI. Okay, so what you can see now, down the right hand side, you can see the fields that are in that file, and I just have a blank page on the left. So what we're going to do is we're going to now build our report dashboard from this data. So the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at card types. I think that's the first thing we'll start with. We'll look at card types. So we're going to just select on the right hand side of the screen here. We're going to select card type, and what you'll see happen is in the main screen I now have card types appear there, but nothing further. So we need to say, what else do we want to look at here? So obviously with card type, let's say we want to look at amount. So if I select amount on the right, you'll see that I now have a card type and I have an amount per card type. So now we want to have a look at how we want to see this data. And one of the things that I didn't mention is, as well as the fields here, we've got visualizations. So visualizations are the different methods or ways in which you can see the data once you have it on screen. There's all kinds of different charts there. We also have value fields here that we can change. We'll look at that a little bit later. And we have format fields here related to the data that we can change, and we'll look at that a little bit later. On the far left, what I should have said earlier, sorry, there is 3 sections here. So this is the main report view that we're in. If we select the middle section, this is the data view. So this is effectively the file that we're looking at. We can expand this on the right hand side, and again we have our columns. And then here we have the relationships view. Now this we're not going to be using today because we're using a single file. But if you were pulling data out of a system and you were looking at multiple tables across that system, you would use this relationship view to link the tables and create a hierarchy of the tables. So that's what that is. So we've got our card type and our amount here, and what we're going to do here is I'm going to look at our horizontal bar chart. That's how I want to see this information here. So I'm just going to select that, and you can see as soon as I select that, it actually turns that data into that type of graph. And I'm now looking at it as a horizontal bar chart. So we want to have a look at something else in our data now. So all we have to do is simply click out of that area onto a blank area of the screen and select something else we want to look at. So let's have a look at expense type. So now again, similar to the card type, we've got type of expenses here, and let's drag this so that it is next to our original piece of data. Let's add the amount to this as well. So now we're looking at amount by card and amount by expense type. And let's have a look at this as a pie chart. So again, I just go to the visualizations and I select pie chart. And what that does is it shows me a pie chart of the information I'm looking at. So let's look at total amount of expenditure. What I'm going to do what I've showed you is selecting the fields, and that allows something to appear in the main page here, but you can also simply drag and drop. So I'm just going to select the amount and I'm going to drag it onto the main area and drop it. And I'm going to say that I want to look at this as a card, because there's no point that being a chart, because it's one single figure. And I can resize it and move it to where I want it to be. So what we've got at the moment, we've got overall expenditure, we've got the expenditure broken down by type of card, and we've got expenditure broken down by type of expense. Okay, so let's look at something else. If I want to know how many transactions were used to get me to this figure, I want to have a look at how many transactions are actually included in this 4.07 billion amount. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this box and I'm going to paste it. So I now get a mirror image of the same box, which I'm going to put underneath here. I'm now going to go to the fields list. You can see this is the fields list here, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. Currently it's showing the amount. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to say, let's have a look at the count. So the count is now telling me that there was actually 26,000 individual transactions that make up my expenditure of 4.07 billion. So let's copy and paste this again. So I'm going to copy this, paste it again, and this time I'm going to drag it up here. And what I want to look at now is I want to look at the average amount for each expenditure. So again, I'm going to go into the fields and I'm going to look at average. And this is now showing me an amount, which is an average amount per expenditure. So what you're seeing here, if I just go back into my spreadsheet, we're going to add a map to this in a second and get some sort of geographical information on what we're looking at. But we started off with a spreadsheet that has a lot of lines on it. As you can see there, we've got 26,000 lines here of data, but it's very simple data. I've only got 5 columns, and those columns are very simply a location, a date, a type of card, a type of expense, a gender, and an amount. This is already giving me quite a lot of information to slice and dice here, and it's all being done via a single spreadsheet through the Power BI desktop using a graphical interface, so a user interface, to select what you want and how you want to see it. So the point of this is that you don't have to be a data guru sitting by a SQL server and writing SQL queries or any type of clever code or insane formulas to actually display this information. You can extract the data into a simple Excel spreadsheet and slice and dice it from there, just using the user interface that we have. So as I said, let's have a look now at some localized data. So let's see where the transactions were actually made. So the obvious part of this is going to be held in the city information. So I'm just going to click into an empty space down here. I'm going to select city and I'm going to drag it onto my page. What you'll see I get now is I get a map. So Power BI is using Bing Maps. You can see the little logo down there. And what it's doing is it's showing me little bubbles in the cities where these expenditures were made and where they happened. So again, all it's doing is it's looking at this particular column and it is displaying the information and the totals for each city. onto Bing Maps. This obviously can be done worldwide. As I say, we're looking at a fairly simple spreadsheet and a fairly simple data set, which is looking at the UK only, but obviously this can be done worldwide, and we'll have a look at a couple of more sort of clever dashboards that have been created as well in a second that show that kind of information. So the problem that we have here is if I zoom in and you look at the cities, you can see that the bubbles are all the same size. So we've given a graphical illustration of where expenditure has been made, but we don't have any illustration of where more money was spent than other areas, because these bubbles are all the same size. So what we want to do now is try and have a look at that. So if I now select with this here, if I select amount from my data, what you should see when I select that is these bubbles all resize. So there you go. You can see just from selecting the amount, adding it to the city combination, I now have different size bubbles which show me more accurately my expenditure across the UK by city and by volume. So obviously it's quite self-explanatory. The smaller bubbles, less expenditure, and the larger bubbles, more expenditure. London being, unsurprisingly, the largest bubble on the map. As I said, we can, you've seen me able to zoom in and zoom out on the map, so you can focus on certain areas. And this really, in 20 minutes, we have developed a basic dashboard using an Excel spreadsheet in Power BI, just using the user interface and not using any kind of fancy querying or database query codes. But the other thing that Power BI does is that this isn't just static data. It's actually live data. So all of these graphs that we've created will filter the data. So for example, if I come in here and look at card type and I say, well, if I click on the gold card type, what we should see is that all of the data on my dashboard has now changed to reflect only the amounts that were used, the average transactions, the counts, and the areas on a gold card. If I select platinum, the same thing happens. You can see the figures change. Similarly, if I do the same on the pie chart and I say, okay, well, how much of this expenditure was down to bills? Again, just clicking on that highlights everything and splits everything so that I'm looking just at bills. If I want to look at fuel, it does the same thing. So the point here is that this is not just pretty pictures on a screen. It's actually living, breathing data. And as you click on various areas of this report, it does alter the report to show you only the data that is relevant to what you're clicking on at the moment. If you want to select multiple fields, so let's say I want to look at fuel and entertainment, it's just Control and click. And now I'm looking at a combined totals of just fuel and entertainment. Everything else is not being counted. So we've created our report. One of the things I mentioned earlier is this format field here, which we haven't really looked at much. So if I just quickly jump into the format field, you can see data label here. I can select colors, display types, decimals, font sizes and choices. There's a large amount of information here, so you can literally spend a fair amount of time getting this to look exactly how you want it to look. And the question might be, once you've got your dashboard, what do you want? What happens next? Well, Power BI, being a Microsoft product, is completely integrated and ingrained with Office 365. So if I open my browser here, I'm signed into my Office 365 account. You can see that one of the options I have here is Power BI. So what we can do is we can publish our report once we've created it directly to Power BI in Office 365. So that's how we can share it with other users. Anyone who has access on Office 365 to log into this account, or anything that we share, any report we share on Office 365 with specific users, will be able to see our report. So how do we do that? Quite simply, we click Publish. So what I'm going to do, now that I've created my report, I'm going to say Publish. Just to preface this by saying you do have to be signed into Power BI. You can see I'm signed in here, my name is here, and that is how Power BI knows which Office 365 account to upload or publish this report to. So I'm going to save my changes. I'm going to give it a name. And it's going to go away, save that, publish it to Power BI on the web, and come back telling me success. So let's have a look at what we've now got on Power BI. We can close our Power BI desktop now. We're not going to need this anymore. I'm just going to minimize it for the moment. Reopen my Office 365 and select the Power BI option. So what you'll see when this loads the first time is you will see a much more detailed dashboard than the one we've just created. Obviously, as I said at the beginning, this is quite a basic overview to show you how easy it is to create these dashboards and reports and let your data actually really speak for you, from raw data to something that's very visual, that's easy for anyone to understand, and doesn't require anybody to look through tens or hundreds or thousands of lines of data to find the information. So here's a few dashboards. Obviously the first thing I'm going to look at is down here. Here is my dashboard that you'll see I created, and I named it Webinar Power BI Demo. When it loads, you should be looking at exactly what we've just created. You can see here it is exactly the same as what we've just created in our desktop Power BI. Now that it is in Power BI and Office 365, we can edit the report again directly in here. Now what you'll see here is it's exactly the same interface as we had on the desktop version. Everything is available to us, so we can change our visualizations, we can change our figures. Again, if we highlight areas on the report, it's dynamic, it's still dynamic, and everything is still live. Any changes that you want to make, you can save. This button here is important. I'll touch on that in a second, but basically if you have the report dashboard linked directly to a database, a live database, you can refresh the data so that it shows you up to the minute data based on that connection. If I now want to, at the moment this is just a report, it's also uploaded my data sets, which is why I'm getting my fields on the right hand side here. But if I want to add this as a dashboard to my other dashboards, which are shared across the business, all I have to do here is pin live page in the top right corner, and wait for it to pop up and ask me where it wants me to save it to. So I'm going to create a new dashboard. Give it a name, we could have added it to an existing dashboard. I'm going to create a new dashboard and I'm going to pin it. So what you'll see now is I have it added here to my actual dashboard list, and I can go into my dashboards and wait for it to load, and there it is with all my other dashboards. So it's really that easy to use Power BI. You don't have to be even an Excel genius. So this is very useful for businesses which may have a business intelligence IT type person who will feed you Excel spreadsheets, or in any kind of finance or sales area where you are extracting your own data from your system. And as I said, we're talking about this from the perspective of Dynamics NAV today, but it doesn't have to be NAV. This will plug into multiple solutions, as you've seen. So let's have a look at some of the more detailed dashboards. Let's have a look at this one first, which is called Microsoft Dynamics NAV. And the reason I'm looking at this one is because this is actually linked directly into my Dynamics NAV, which is installed on my local laptop. And the way that we do that is by web services. So within NAV itself, when you have a data set that you want to use, if I just jump into the administration console here for my Dynamics NAV connection, what you'll see, those of you who are running NAV will be familiar with this. These are basically the service tiers that your databases are running on. So if you look at my demo service tier here, one of the areas that we have is this OData service here. So when you publish an OData service, you give it a port number, and this is the service that Power BI is using to talk directly to your NAV database. So in NAV itself, you'd create a web service, and if we have a look at my web services, you will see that I have several web services here, and you will see that I have an OData URL, which is looking at my local machine, port number 7352, which you will recognize is this port number here in my demo database instance of NAV. And it is looking at a specific company, which is Dave's Demo Company, which is the company that I am currently in. You can see in the top right corner here. So this effectively publishes these reports, live connections onto Power BI in Office 365. So what that means is that when you come into Power BI, you will have a gateway, the data gateway here, which synchronizes the information, and refreshing the information. This is up to date at the moment, so refreshing it won't actually change anything, but you can either automate the refresh. So again, in Dynamics NAV, if I go to my job queue, those of you again who are using Dynamics NAV will be familiar with job queues. You can create a job queue entry in NAV which you set to automatically synchronize your data with Power BI. That means you never have to do it manually, but if you don't have that set up, you can still do this manually, and that is what the refresh button is for. So this is looking directly into my NAV database, and it's giving me a whole range of information. So I've got current sales this month, sales orders that are open by salesperson, my opportunities pipeline, a breakdown by customer group. I've got 3 customer groups, domestic, EU and foreign. The sales shares of item types. This is using the Microsoft demo data, so it's effectively looking at furniture. My sales and profit by items, a profitability by country, cash cycle, revenue, expenses, a trial balance, and margins by month. So there's a lot in this particular dashboard, and if I click into any one of these fields, what it does is you can see it's jumped me down to the report here. And one of the things I didn't mention in the Power BI desktop, you can see you've got page 1. We could add multiple pages to this data set, and we could create further information on multiple pages and then publish it to Office 365 or Power BI on the web, and then you would get what you see here. So you can see I've got multiple pages of reports here. So the dashboard itself gives me an overview, a really good overview. But if I want to look in more depth, so if I look at sales this month by customer group, and I click on that and it jumps me down to the report, and I click on item sales by customer, for example, you can see I've now got a lot more information than what was showing just on the dashboard itself. And we can drill down into this in more detail. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is all live data, so I may want to see, okay, well, item sales and profit by my finished items, and everything changes to be showing only what I've selected as a filter. Every field is the same, so let's have a look at Germany. It zooms into Germany, shows me only what's going on in Germany. So there's only one salesperson, there's only these 4 customers and these 4 cities that are involved. If we take that off, let's look at the UK. I've got 2 salespeople in the UK that are involved, and I've got multiple customers, multiple cities, and again I can say, well, let me have a look at just what's been done by John Roberts. He's only got 1 customer. Peter Sado has got quite a few more customers. So as you can see, all of this data, once it's uploaded, is not just static. You're not just creating a picture, it's actually live data that can be used whenever you feel like it to drill deeper just by using basic filters. Again, I can use multiple filters. I don't have to just use one. And if you have the data gateway set up and the OData set up with your NAV install, then you can rest assured that the data you're looking at is always data as of the last few minutes, depending on how regularly the update happens, the automatic update happens. So the difference between this and Jet reports, for those of you who use Jet reports, is that with Jet reports you would have to refresh the reports that you were using this function here. So once your report is designed, it's designed similar to Power BI. Jet reports doesn't quite do the visuals as well, but it does analyze the data exceptionally well. And really, to be honest, Power BI and Jet reports are a perfect partnership. But with Jet reports, you would have to select the report that you were wanting to look at, and then you would have to refresh. And refreshing takes a few seconds to happen, depending on the report, depending on the amount of data, and depending on the method that you're using to connect Jet reports to your database. And obviously anything that Jet reports displays is displayed in Excel, which makes it a little bit harder to share than things that are displayed in Power BI, because Power BI reports can be shared directly in Office 365 for anyone to log on and see. So this is our NAV dashboard. We'll look at a couple of others that I've got here, but I'll just flick through the tabs so you can see the amount of information. Again, anyone who's using NAV or has seen NAV in the past will recognize things like customer posting groups and posting names and country region codes. These are all parts of NAV setup. So again, I can filter and see I just want to have a look at the sales to my EU customers. I want to have a look at the sales to my domestic customers. my foreign customers, because I've actually got a couple in the US over there. Finance. So this one dashboard, we've got product reports, we've got customer reports, we've got sales reports, we've got finance reports, and we've got sales orders by salesperson, which could effectively be used almost as a commission type report if we wanted. Finance can quickly see KPIs on gross margin and operating margins, net changes, actual by date and KPI, and so on. As you can see, as I move along the data lines here, the live data is giving me all of the figures for each individual point on that graph. So let's have a look at a couple of others. Here's a customer profitability sample. Again, I've got 3 tabs here. I've got my sales executives here, and I have revenues by region, variance to budget, revenue by state, this is American data, and revenue by month and variance. There's some industry margin analysis here. We'll wait for these to load. What they're doing is querying the data set behind them, and we can look at the information in here. So we've got this split between specific industries, and again, I'm interested in oil and gas. Let's see what oil and gas does, and everything changes to show me only oil and gas. There's only 2 customers, 2 products. Again, I can take that filter off, look at retail. I've clicked on services, but same thing, we'll click off services and onto retail. Okay, and an executive scorecard. So this is a scorecard for a specific sales executive, so that shows how he's performing. Here's a retail analysis sample. So any of you who are into retail, this is the kind of report that would be useful to you. Overview, district monthly sales, new stores, and district sales reports. So again, just to re-stress that effectively with Power BI, once the report is created and the data is there, especially if it's using something like Dynamics NAV and it's plugged directly into the database, there is no weekly reporting that has to be done manually by anybody. You literally would just have to refresh the reports each week, and they're ready for you to have a look at or circulate, and just refresh the data live if you need to. Supplier quality analysis. This is a useful one for manufacturers. So we can see here there's different types of defect, either rejected, whether there's an impact or no impact, totals and areas, and again categories. So was the defect down to packaging? Let's filter on that. We can see that these are the defects down to packaging. And this kind of thing you can obviously use to chase up your suppliers if you start seeing a pattern emerge that a certain supplier that doesn't package the product very well, so it often arrives damaged. Top to bottom analysis, downtime analysis, and the last one is the one that we created here. So you can see there's a great deal that you can actually do with Power BI in a very simple way. It's not a replacement for Jet Reports. It's a perfect partner for Jet Reports. It is not restricted just to Microsoft database types, as we showed in the beginning. Here's our OData feed, by the way. There's direct web connections. Just as a matter of interest as well, if we pop in here, Microsoft do have multiple types of services that you can connect to directly from Power BI. So if we have a look in here, wait for this to refresh, you can see how many solutions here Power BI is able to plug into. So we've got examples of data here that are looking in. There will be Dynamics CRM here. There's Google Analytics here if you're wanting to look at analytics against a website. MailChimp for if you're marketing and you're looking at responses on your mail shots. We've got AX, we've got CRM Online. As you can see, there's a whole host here that have already been created that you can look at. And whilst I'm talking about that, if we just pop back to my workspace, one of the areas that I would encourage you to look at is this Power BI Showcase website, which we'll have a look at in a second. The final thing I want to say really about the interface is this function here, ask a question about your data. So we, as you saw earlier, we created our charts, but once your charts are created or your data set is there, if you're not sure how to create the charts, or you just want to do a direct query against your data, Power BI actually has logic that allows you to query your data with direct keywords. So any keywords that are entered will trigger a response, and that is what this ask a question about your data is. So if we have a look at that, let's, for example, have a look at the retail analysis sample here. We'll look at this year's sales, last year's sales. I'm just going to select that so we can drill down into it. And I'll expand my filters. You can see here that when I expand this out, I'm going to select Edit Report. And if I expand the fields that are here, you will see that this actual report, you'll see what fields it's using because they are highlighted yellow in the main area of the data fields that are available to me. So we can see that this is built from the fiscal month field, this year's sales, and last year's sales. So let's, for example, say that we want to recreate this chart using keywords, and we're going to use the fields that the chart is made from. So I'm just going to jump back to my dashboard, retail analysis sample, ask a question about your data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in here what were this year's sales. You can see it's now starting to pick up some of the fields that are included in this report. And I've got a figure here for this year's sales. I'm going to go further and say, and last year's sales. And now you can see I've got two figures. I want to drill that down even more, so I'm going to say by month. Now I've got my figures by month, but this is quite hard to read. So let's say, okay, I want to see this as an area chart. So as area chart. As soon as I do that, lo and behold, the actual chart that I'm looking at, you will recognize as exactly the same chart on my dashboard. So this is an example of how Power BI can even respond to specific words based on the fields. So as long as you know the data that you are putting into Power BI, you can query it simply by asking a question and typing that question in. And as you type each section of the question in, it will give you a result back until it ends up showing you exactly what you want to see. So that's quite a cool feature that, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any other sort of reporting tools that allow you to do that. So that's quite a good thing. So just in finishing, as I was saying, the Power BI showcase, if you want to have a little bit more information, you can obviously contact Advantage if you want to see anything in more detail than we've done today. And you can find us on the web. I'm sure those of you, you've all registered, so you're aware of where our website is. And we have one of our account managers on the webinar with us, so she'll be able to have contact with any of you if needed. But also, if you just want to pop off and have a look at some of the other things that Power BI can do, there's a rather cool website here that Microsoft have put together called the Power BI Showcase. And this is quite interesting because this really shows you the depths of what can be done with Power BI. And although we've looked at it today from the perspective of an ERP solution, so everything that we've looked at today has been based on Dynamics NAV, but we have outlined that Power BI can integrate with other systems. The Power BI showcase page is a very good example of what can be achieved with Power BI, even if NAV is not involved. So there's some interesting reports and dashboards that have been created on here. This is one of my favorites, the analysis of all the earthquakes around the world over the last 12 months. And this is taken obviously from a geological solution. There's websites and links to videos which show exactly how the report was created. So that is one that you can look at. It doesn't seem to want to be opening for me at the moment. Let me try that again. Because you can open these all in full screen. Here we go. Let's give it another try. So here we go. Here's our reports, and they explain basically what they've done and how they've gathered this report. And this is based on Microsoft Azure. And the US Geological Survey earthquake data, and the National Buoy Center, or I suppose if you're an American, you'd call it a buoy. That's all feeding through Excel that's based in Microsoft Azure. So this is all in the cloud, and it pumps out into this report. So we can have a look at the report. You can see the amount of time that is covered by this data, the magnitude of the earthquakes, the number of earthquakes in the database, times of day they happened, where the largest ones were. And we can see worldwide earthquakes. So if any of you are planning on emigrating anywhere, I wouldn't go to Brazil. You can see they have a lot of earthquakes in Brazil. But this is an example. There's other examples on here. There's quite an interesting one which shows you the likelihood of surviving sinking on the Titanic based on whether you were male, female, what age you were at the time, and what class they were traveling in on the ship. So although this isn't strictly related to what we've been talking about today with ERP and Dynamics NAV and how Power BI plugs into that, this site is a very good place to just pop and have a look at just what kind of reporting and how much detail you can get out of a Power BI dashboard with your own data. The sky's the limit, really. So as I say, not a replacement for Jet Reports, but a perfect partner for Jet Reports, because you can use the Jet Reports predefined data models to create your dashboards in Power BI. So that's it for today. Thank you for attending the webinar. I really appreciate you joining us today. Any questions, please just pop them in, and we'll try and answer them as we can. Otherwise, if you'd like to see any more or hear any more, feel free to get hold of Advantage, and hopefully we'll get to talk to some of you over the next few weeks and months. I'll leave the webinar open for a few minutes just in case there's any questions. Yes. Can you hear me again? I think I muted myself. Yes, you can query SharePoint online. Yes, you can. SharePoint sits within Office 365, and you can, for example, upload your data models into SharePoint and then query it directly from SharePoint. That shouldn't be a problem. Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what languages you could use. Most people that I come across are using SQL databases and using standard SQL queries to pull data out. But I don't really know what you would use for Oracle or anything like that. So based on understanding with SQL and Microsoft products, as far as I'm aware, whatever is current is the standard to pull information out of different database types you can use, and Power BI will be able to talk to it. But if you want us to, we can certainly check up on that for you and give you a list if you want to give Karen contact details. I'll have a look at that for you, and I'll drop you an email with an answer. Okay, thank you everybody. Thanks again for attending. We'll stop the webinar now, and again, any questions you think of later, just drop us a line. Thanks for attending.